Hey, welcome back to our channel, Texas Spine and Sports Rehab Clinic. I'm Dr. AJ Vasquez. I am a doctor of chiropractic as well as a doctor of, what would you call it, sports rehabilitation. Like I tell everybody, we take care of all kinds of sports injuries, from the shoulder to the back to the toes to the ankles. We try to take care of it all. Today's topic, which is a very, very common question I get, is from some of my martial artists, some of my active athletes, is what happens when you hurt your wrist. Sometimes we can hurt our wrist by falling on it. Sometimes we can hurt our wrist from maybe lifting a little heavy, maybe our technique's not too good. Sometimes you can have it from, as you guys know, martial arts. Sometimes there can be a wrist lock, or they can be maybe you get your wrist caught in a position that's a little bit too aggressive. Whether you respond to it and get your wrist out, or you tap, which happens in jiu-jitsu, bottom line is that it gets hurt. What I tell most patients is that there's different levels of wrist injuries. There's grade 1, which is kind of a mild strain sprain. There's a grade 2, which is a little more severe, not going away in say a week or two. And then there's a grade 3. A lot of times that's where even if you've rested it 2 to 4 weeks, it's just still troubling you. Sometimes it requires surgery. Sometimes it just requires long-term rehabilitation. Our focus today is kind of look at different injuries, kind of look at what the philosophy is with rehabilitating them. First and foremost, I will say that if you injure the wrist, you got to get the inflammation down. Okay, how you do that can be something taken oral. You can do something like a topical. I always tell patients, ice is your friend. Ice can help us get to a point where it's a little bit more manageable. I personally like kinesio tape. I think kinesio tape has done wonders. As you guys know, Dr. Kinslow started with kinesio tape back in 1998 at the Seoul Olympics. He still continues his research to this day. I believe he's now working out of Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. But what I tell people is kinesio tape is amazing stuff. Helps with inflammation. I know I've used it on my wrist. Most wrist injuries are going to be hyperflexion, or they're going to be hyperextension. So they could either hurt this side or it's going to hurt this side. What I tell everybody is either way it needs to be treated. Okay, and one of the ways that we see is a lot of times we'll have a little bit of swelling on the wrist creased. Also, we'll kind of get sometimes that fluid will move down into the forearm belly. On the back side, it might be a little less noticeable. You'll still get inflammation here. More likely it'll wrap around into the thumb. And then, of course, it'll come down the forearm. Because of gravity, a lot of times the fluid will move, okay? So it's important to get the inflammation down. It's important to stabilize the joint. So I always tell people tape. You can even use old school athletic tape to kind of keep it there. Especially if you're an active athlete, but you got a day job. Obviously, we can't call in if we have a wrist injury. We want to keep going. What I tell most people is level 2 is usually where it gets interesting. Sometimes the ice, sometimes the taping won't work. So you might need some ultrasound, maybe some Graston therapy, a little laser therapy, just kind of get that swelling down, get the tendons moving freely again. Last, I tell people is sometimes it needs a little bit of strengthening. And how we do that, I tell most patients, I'm going to tell you what not to do. Don't go to the gym, get a 20-pound dumbbell and try to strengthen it that way. What you need to do is work with your grip first. Okay, the grip of the wrist works the forearm, and when you have a hyperflexion or hyperextension, either way, the tendons that move into the hand have to keep the stability, and 2, you got to keep the function of it. So I always tell people is, hey, start with easy, low resistance type things like a tennis ball, maybe some bands. Wrist, if the injury's on this side, you want to, of course, worry about wrist flexion. If the injury's on this side, you want to worry about wrist extension. What you don't want to do is, like I said, just throw some heavy weights on there and try to strengthen it through, because tendons are a little bit different than the big muscle groups like the quads, the hamstrings, even your chest muscles. Those have quite a bit more dense tissue. The wrist is very small. Even in somebody that's 6'4", obviously, their wrist is still small compared to the other parts of their body. So I would recommend bands. Like I said, eventually working your way up to light weights. If this does not work, of course, I would go see a sports injury specialist. We'd love to take your questions. You're always welcome to message us, but I want you to make sure that you take care of it. Obviously, the goal is to get you back to getting on the mats or getting back. Hello, YouTube. I just wanted to go over some of the exercises we talked about on wrist injuries. Our first, what I would call a rehabilitation exercise is finding a ball. You can do a tennis ball, racquetball, something that has a little give to it, all right? And just be able to squeeze it. Especially, like I said, if the injury is here, squeezing it helps kind of activate those tendons. That way you can use it. You also can create a little flexion. That way you can strengthen your wrist. If it's an extension injury, again, you can squeeze and extend as that kind of activates the wrists. As you guys well know, this is going to give you resistance for a little while, maybe, I would say maybe a week, then you can kind of upgrade to something else. The other tool that we like to use a lot of times is one of these, okay, we call them flex bars or TheraBand flex bars. Very useful for us in the rehabilitation world because they mimic daily function, things like turning a pickle jar or opening a mustard, you know. But two is that they allow us to use the forearm tendons, okay. Our tendons are made for endurance, so that's what we work on first, okay, creating that range of motion and then creating that need to build our endurance. And then last comes our strength. So keep that in mind. Like I said, you can kind of make some homemade tools. I tell patients all the time, if you don't have a flex bar or if you want something at home, you can always use a towel and be able to roll the towel. That's very good at, you know, basically building back some of that tendon endurance and strength that you need to have your daily function too. Of course, it helps you get back on the mats, gets you back on the field, gets you back on the track a lot faster. So hope this helps. Have a good one.